The lights of Broadway glow in the descending night, the Broadway of 1929. A cab pulls up before a swank hotel. Two doormen named Laurel and Hardy bobble about, but look inside that cab. Perhaps you recognize the girl. This bit player is to become one of the most publicized women in the world. Her role in this Hal Roach comedy called Double Whoopee was small. It provided Jean Harlow with her first real break.
Hello, and welcome back to another deep dive into one of the wonderful comedies of Laurel and Hardy. I'm Patrick Vasey, the author of the forthcoming book, Laurel and Hardy Silence, the editor of the all-new Laurel and Hardy magazine, and your host for the next hour or so. On today's show, we've reached the start of 1929 in the Laurel and Hardy chronology, and as usual, we'll be having a close look at what was happening at the Hal Roach Studios and the production of Stan and Babe's next comedy, and that film is their 32nd film together and their third from last silent film, Double Whoopee. And I'm very happy and even more relieved to say that I won't be doing this alone. So acting as a prince to my Prime Minister, and joining me a little later to discuss Double Whoopee will be returning guest, film historian and expert Glenn Mitchell. But before we dive down the lift shaft of the film, a few notices. So firstly, you may have seen on my social media last month, the podcast reached number 9 in Sweden's film history podcast charts, which is the highest position so far in that country, and I'm really pleased about that. So I have to say, tack så mycket to all my Swedish listeners. And I also received 2 new reviews and star ratings for the podcast, and the first comes from Stansig, and he says, "A great listen. This podcast has reminded me how much I love the wonderful Laurel and Hardy. I listened to the big business one and now have started from number 1. Well researched and presented with infectious enthusiasm. A real treat." So thank you, Stansig. The second review is another 5-star review and it says, "Outstanding podcast with outstanding guests. If you're a fan of Laurel and Hardy, there's nothing better, believe me." And that was from Scott Oz4 on Apple Podcasts from the USA. Thank you so much for that. And the final 4-star review came from Shiffy, who had praise and also a grumble. And this review reads, "Great content, audio level varies when listening. I really enjoy the podcast a lot. Background on the boys and their films is fantastic. But on several episodes, I've listened to the audio of the host is much lower and softer than the guest, whose audio seems to be much louder. To a degree, it is distracting when I have to constantly raise and lower the audio levels. We'll keep listening and enjoying and hope this is a random issue. Thank you." So thank you very much for your kind words and also for your feedback about the volume levels. I must say I hadn't noticed that, so I'll be checking that quite closely. But apologies if any of you out there have found that distracting. I've been using some different recording software recently, so it's probably a result of that, actually. But as I say, I always appreciate your feedback or constructive criticism, so please do keep it coming. On a more positive note, more of you have become patrons of the podcast this last month by joining me on patreon.com. So huge thank yous go to David Williams, Bob Borgen, Mark Garcia, John Hayes, Gregory Topping, Kevin Shannon, Laurie Pitts, Thomas Blasey, Sidney Trout and Flip Lauer. Now my patrons are my sponsors, and so your support means everything. To have you in my corner means the world, so 1,000 thanks. To show your support and gain access to exclusive podcast episodes and much more besides, search for the Laurel and Hardy Podcast on patreon.com. That's patreon.com. And just one final update for you is that Russell and I have just completed issue number 3 of our Laurel and Hardy magazine as I record this. This issue, summer 2023, focuses on the boys' wonderful short, Helpmates. And who better to have written the lead article but our friend Randy Skretvet. In Randy's exclusive piece, he explains why Helpmates is his favourite Laurel and Hardy film. In addition, there's a couple of essays that I've contributed from 2 of my forthcoming books, Laurel and Hardy Silence and Laurel and Hardy Shorts. And building on the last episode of the podcast, Serge Bromberg has written a terrific article about the 1927 Blu-ray set. In that, Serge talks about the reasons that Stan and Babe's silent films were in such a bad state, and we also have some great images showing before and after screen comparisons. So if you're not already a subscriber to the Laurel and Hardy magazine, it only costs £15 or about $30 per year, so do visit laurelandhardyfilms.com to subscribe today. And that's it, that's your update. So now I'll escort you through the hotel lobby and let's get you signed in. And today's film in focus is Double Whoopee. It was filmed February 5th, 1929 to February 9th, 1929. It was produced by Hal Roach, directed by Lou Foster, photographed by George Stevens. Its main supporting cast: Jean Harlow, William Gillespie, Hans Yobi or John S. Peters, Charlie Rogers, Charlie Hall and Tiny Sanford. It was a hectic yet creatively fruitful end to 1928. The boys and their production team worked up to Christmas Eve, had the next day off, and then returned to the studio on the 26th for one final day of filming Big Business. Stan, Babe, and all the talent employed at the Hal Roach Studios were then given a well-earned and unusually lengthy break. The lot was completely shut down for the next month, from December 29th until January 28th, 1929, to enable the mammoth task of converting the studio for sound film production. The dawn of a new and somewhat uncertain era at the Hal Roach Studios had finally begun. The cost of upgrading the operation on this scale was considerable, especially for a relatively small studio like Roach's. Therefore, it was decided that to keep costs as low as possible, Roach's in-house craftsmen would handle the practical and physical conversion. Thomas Benton Roberts, a man usually employed as a designer and builder of props and sets on the lot, was tasked with heading up these vital alterations. Quote, "When sound came in 1928, the Hal Roach studio had to be practically rebuilt to receive the equipment of Victor Recording, the people who were contracted to put sound on the funny pictures of that plant. I suppose because of my previous experience in construction, the problem was delicately placed on my bench. It had already been decided to use our own people on the lot to do this work, so this was not easy, but the better part of diplomacy. Again, this was a working family, and as always, Mr. Roach wanted to do everything to hold it together as a unit. Besides doing the structural design and forms for the reinforced concrete, this work led to a multiple number of other tasks, such as placing the new sound equipment and rebuilding the projection room larger for the new machines." End quote. Such was the magnitude of the renovations they took until early March to complete, too long for the studio to remain inactive. As soon as the doors reopened at the end of January, Stan and the writing team got to work drafting what would become the boys' first comedy of 1929, Double Whoopee. Although this was their first outing before the cameras, it would become their second release of the year. Double Whoopee was not issued with an accompanying musical track as with Big Business, whether for cost saving or simply because the Victor Company's services were all tied up on the conversion project. The arrival of talking picture production wasn't the only significant change at the Hal Roach Studios at the end of 1928. Two important staff members on the lot resigned in December, just before the planned shutdown. The first to hand in his notice on December 15th was Ray Coffin, a well-liked and amiable man with considerable experience within the industry. Coffin had a reputation as one of Hollywood's best-known publicists, and had been the head of publicity for the Roach Studio for the previous 3 years. But more significantly, however, was the resignation of supervising director and vice president of the company, Leo McCary, who had accepted an offer to direct feature films for Pathé. Over the previous 6 years, McCary had become a hugely influential and popular figure at the studio. First employed as a gag writer on the Our Gang series, he quickly began directing and successfully developing the Charlie Chase series. But arguably, McCary's most important achievement during his time at the Roach Studio would be the part he played in identifying the potential in Stan and Babe as a comedy duo, and developing the Laurel and Hardy characters and their unique brand of comedy. If Stan and Ollie were the clay, then Leo McCary was most certainly the sculptor. His impact on the team cannot be underestimated, and Stan Laurel was undoubtedly grateful for the start McCary gave the team. Whilst it's been well documented that Stan unofficially directed the boys' films and was in effect the director's director, his reverence for Leo McCary was such that he would never question or oppose his ideas or direction. McCary's departure meant that from this point on, Stan was in complete control of the development of the Laurel and Hardy characters and the direction that their comedies would take. Two of the most endearing of Stan and Ollie's qualities, prevalent throughout their films, are their blind faith in their abilities and their determination to succeed in whatever they're doing. No matter how suitable, or perhaps more appropriately unsuitable they may be, they set about whatever task is at hand with unwavering and relentless confidence. Inevitably, they falter, fall, and fail, but they always pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and either try again or move on to a fresh challenge. The premise of the boys' first adventure in the post-McCary era, Double Whoopee, a title blatantly parodying a popular Broadway show starring Eddie Cantor titled Whoopee, harks back to their earlier outing from Soup to Nuts. The boys are sent from an employment agency, so they arrive at the swanky Frontenac Hotel to commence their new roles as the hotel's doorman and footman. The opening scene shows a busy hotel, and the first title card reads, "The hotel lobby buzzed with excitement. The Prince was coming." And indeed he was. The Prince, played by John Peters, the convincing double for Erich von Stroheim, has just arrived outside the hotel along with his thickly bearded Prime Minister, played by Charlie Rogers. The news of his arrival spreads like wildfire through the assembled guests and hotel staff in the lobby, and everyone's eyes become eagerly fixed on the door. But before the Prince and his entourage enter, in walk Stan and Ollie, the latter with typical pomp, and march right up to the front desk. Everyone wrongly assumes that our heroes are the two dignitaries, and the crowd follows the boys to the desk, where the waiting staff deferentially attend to the pair. There follows a lovely sequence where the boys are asked to sign their names in the guest book. Ollie does it with his usual pretentious aplomb, and Stan takes an age to dip the pen and mark the page with a simple X. But not before he's soaked one page with ink, and one of the guests too. This is the first time that Stan and Babe use this particular gag, but it wouldn't be the last, reusing it 3 more times in Any Old Port, Air Raid Wardens, and The Bullfighters. The hotel manager, played by William Gillespie, appears on the scene to officially welcome his esteemed guests. Ollie, utterly unaware of the mistaken identity, presents his agency's letter of introduction to the manager. The embarrassed and apologetic tone of the letter reads, "These boys are the best we could do on such short notice. There is some reason to believe that they may be competent." The hotel manager realises the mistaken identity and is none too pleased. He has the boys quickly ushered away to be given their uniforms and instructions, and then the real Prince and Prime Minister enter the hotel. Throughout the film, Stan and Ollie remain blissfully oblivious to the visiting dignitaries, paying them hardly any attention, save for a few cursory glances. This only adds to the humour, as it's down to our lovable friends that the Prince, bedecked in brilliant white clothing, falls down a lift shaft, not once but 3 times, and lands face down, sprawled in an oily mess at the bottom. And as one might expect, Stan and Ollie bring their own particular brand of ineptitude to their positions, and the hotel's door has never been so poorly managed. 17-year-old Jean Harlow is one hotel guest that falls foul of the boys' incompetency and is worthy of note. As Harlow steps from her cab, Stan accidentally closes the car door, trapping the back of her gown, which is left behind, stuck in the door as she walks away. She proceeds through the busy hotel, escorted by Ollie, and Stan informs him that he needs to preserve her modesty. Harlow had been working as an extra at the Roach Studios for a short while, getting paid just $10 a day. As well as appearing as an extra in Laurel and Hardy's Liberty, she was also briefly in comedies with Charlie Chase and Edgar Kennedy. Just after Christmas 1928, days before the studio closed, Roach signed her up to a 5-year contract where she would earn $100 a week. Double Whoopee was to be her breakout movie. Quote, "So overnight, I jumped from the extra ranks into the feminine leading role with Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. I wouldn't trade anything I own for my experience in those comedies. There was a friendliness and camaraderie about that small studio entirely different from the impersonality of the larger places. No one was too busy to help and advise. Stan and Babe realised my ignorance and did everything in their power to make me feel at home and at ease. I felt that I was receiving invaluable training in the school from which some of the best-known screenplayers have been graduated." And that was Jean Harlow herself, quoted in New Movie magazine, September 1934. Very shortly after the release of Double Whoopee, and despite being handed a potential big break from Hal Roach, Harlow's contract was terminated at her request. And this is a second quote from the same piece in New Movie magazine. Quote, "As luck would have it, grandfather and grandmother, who rarely went to motion picture theatres, chose for one of their rare visits to the theatre in Kansas City, where the Laurel and Hardy comedy was playing. Today we can all laugh over their horrified surprise when they saw me, dressed only in black lace teddies, appear before them on the screen. But no one laughed then. It was a heartbroken and more than angry grandfather who telephoned me that night and both begged and demanded that I stop motion picture work at once. Because next to my mother, my grandparents have always been closest to my heart. I agreed. The next day, I explained the situation to Hal Roach, and I shall always be grateful for his complete understanding. He released me from my contract, and Jean Harlow became Harleen Carpentier McGrew once more." End quote. It wouldn't be long before Hollywood came calling at Harlow's door again. The industry lured her back in front of the cameras, and her star ascended rapidly. Harlow's screen time in Double Whoopee lasts for less than 3 minutes. William K. Everson described her function as, quote, "no more than a comedy prop," and with good reason. More meaningful appearances in the picture are those of Tiny Sanford, assuming his usual role as a street cop, and Charlie Hall as a grumpy cab driver. This was Hall's 14th picture with Laurel and Hardy, although to this point, and with the exceptions of Leave 'Em Laughing and Two Tars, most of his parts had consisted merely of extras in crowds. Despite his short stature, however, the little Englishman's roles, and more importantly his impact on the boys' films, were about to get a whole lot bigger. Ollie finds a mysterious whistle hanging from his doorman's uniform. He gives it a quick blow, only to find that its purpose is to summon a taxi for departing guests. Charlie Hall's cab pulls up, and he sees only the doorman standing there. With childlike embarrassment, Ollie's only explanation to the driver is to point to the whistle and inform him, "It blewed." Frustrated and annoyed, Charlie berates Ollie and tells him, "Don't let it blew again." He returns to the taxi rank to await a genuine call. Not long after, the inevitable happens. Stan spots the whistle and innocently blows it before Ollie can stop him. Instantly, Hall's cab screeches into the frame. When he realises he's been messed about again, he climbs out of the cab to confront Ollie with, "You blewed it again, sweetheart." This leads to a lovely bit of tit-for-tat with Ollie and Charlie taking turns to destroy items of each other's clothing. This hints at the wonderful exchanges that would come later in classics such as Thicker Than Water and Tit for Tat. Although not on the same prolonged and destructive level as these later comedies, the scene in Double Whoopee is just as much fun. The film's finale is set in the hotel lobby and is yet another attempt to return to the mass carnage endings, with this version borrowing from several of their previous pictures. With reciprocal eye-poking, shin-kicking and food-throwing, it feels too much like a pastiche of their back catalogue. Whilst it's amusing, it's a lazy way to have concluded what had been a comedy quite different from its predecessors until now. Different, perhaps, due to the introduction of another new director to the team. Double Whoopee is the first picture with Louis R. Foster sitting in the director's chair. Foster began working at the Roach Studios on a 6-year apprenticeship, starting as a property man, and worked his way up through construction gang and film laboratories, then as a gagman and writer, until he eventually became an assistant director on Charlie Chase pictures and movies including Laurel and Hardy's Wrong Again. Indeed, Double Whoopee was Foster's first time assuming sole responsibility for directing an entire picture. Laurel, and more importantly Roach, were evidently happy with Foster's direction though, as he remained in the chair for Stan and Babe's final 2 silent shorts, Bacon Grabbers and Angora Love, and also their first 3 talkies, Unaccustomed as We Are, Birthmarks and Men of War. The studio held back Double Whoopee's public release, and audiences received it a couple of weeks after the release of the boys' first talkie, Unaccustomed as We Are, released on 4th of May 1929. Despite still being a silent comedy, without even a musical track to accompany it, audiences lapped it up. The following are a number of exhibitor reviews from Exhibitors Herald World, which span from July 13th, 1929 and run through to November 11th, 1929. A very funny comedy by 2 funniest guys on the screen today, from the Silver Family Theatre, Greenville, Michigan. Another knockout comedy from this pair of swell comedians from Central Theatre, Selkirk, Manitoba. A dandy good comedy with plenty of laughs, advertise it as big as a feature, says the Palace Theatre in Rector, Arkansas. These boys always good in my house, this one extra good, from the Strand Theatre, Jewell, Iowa. Laurel and Hardy are the best comedians on the screen. This one is a dandy, just one roar after another, from the Dreamland Theatre, Carson, Iowa. And the final one, another good one from Stan and Oliver, from the Majestic Theatre in Washington, Kansas. The boys were still on top of their game and loved by their audiences. The Roach Lot was now a hive of activity, with construction work soundproofing the stages well underway, being carried out by Thomas Benton Roberts' in-house crew and under the expert supervision of Victor's Elmer R. Regis. Silent comedies were still king at Roach for the time being, but all minds were nervously turning to sound and the suitability of actors' vocal talents. The Our Gang Kids had recently returned from a 3-month personal appearance tour of theatres stretching as far east as New York, giving them plenty of practice using their voices. Trade papers reported that Stan, Babe and Charlie Chase were also slated for vaudeville dates in January 1929, whilst the studio was still closed, but no record of any appearances has been uncovered. Fortunately, as the boys would find out, their voices were no cause for concern. Instead, they would become hilariously powerful weapons in their comedy arsenal. Joining me today to discuss our film in focus is a fellow Englishman who last joined us back on episode 27 with Wrong Again discussion. It is film historian and friend of the podcast, Mr. A to Z himself. It's Glenn Mitchell. So welcome back to the Laurel and Hardy podcast, Glenn.
Thank you, Patrick. It's lovely to be here.
It's always a pleasure.
I speak virtually, of course.
Virtually, well, this is it. We're used to this now. The beauty of Zoom. Okay, it's always a pleasure to have you back, Glenn. Always a pleasure, and it's been nice. I've put on a couple of posts on social media very recently just to say that today I'll be discussing Double Whoopee with you, good self. And the response actually has been quite nice. I've had a few comments on different social medias about how people enjoy our episodes together. So that was really, really nice.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, absolutely good to know. It's always nice to get positive feedback. Always good.
Oh, yes, absolutely. When you consider some of the feedback people get on the online, my goodness.
Well, we won't go into that.
We won't go into that.
So today we have the pleasure of discussing Double Whoopee.
Do we have to do it twice?
Well, we could do. We certainly could do. Filmed on the 5th of February, 1929. It was obviously the boys' first... it was the first filmed in 29, but it wasn't the first released.
No. To be specific, filmed, 5th to the 9th of Feb, wasn't it?
That's right, 5th to the 9th, pretty quick.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I looking back at these, I'm always astonished by the rapid turnaround. I know that, it was a hectic schedule, but when you think of how much is in these, and they're turning these around in less than a week, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I touched on this on the last 2 episodes where we focused on the films. So we looked at That's My Wife and Big Business, and they were both filmed within a week, and just absolute classic comedies. I mean, Big Business especially.
Yes.
But when you think this one filmed in 4 days, and you look at the set of the Frontenac Hotel. Oh yes, just absolutely out of this world.
Yeah, I mean. You would think that the set construction alone would have taken them that long, but they did a wonderful job with that, and it looks the part and blends with that stock footage of Broadway in the end of the 20s, which I wish I could identify that, because I know I have seen that footage somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
But I can't remember where. So if anybody knows the original source of that New York footage, please tell us, because I have seen it, I know, but in something else, can't remember where.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So we should probably say the title Double Whoopee, its origin is a Broadway hit.
Yes, Eddie Cantor, who was a great friend of Laurel and Hardy, by the way.
Oh, was he really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, they were great friends, and there were some nice photographs of Laurel and Hardy attending a birthday party of Cantor's at some point post-war, I think. Okay. And I hope this is also true. There's a nice story of Laurel and Hardy about to go off on one of the post-war tours, and Cantor seeing them off at the local railway station.
Oh, lovely! That's
to go to wave his friends goodbye. So they knew each other very well and got on great, apparently.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah,
okay.
So they were great friends. And but yes, Cantor's Broadway show opened in 1928, and had the famous near title song "Making Whoopee," which we still know today.
Right.
Still quite familiar.
Yes.
So this, I suppose, was an expansion of that. You know, Cantor could do Whoopee, they can do double Whoopee.
Exactly.
Because that's the thinking. And of course, Cantor did film the show, but not until after double Whoopee. The film was in 1930.
Right.
And that's still around. Yeah, that's still around. I think it was thought last for a very long time, but it had turned up by the 80s, I think, when I first saw it. But it's been on the box a few times.
Yeah. It's always quite interesting how the Roach Studios, I mean, not just even the Roach Studios, I suppose, a lot of Stan's earlier films were sort of based on other films, popular shows, and they're still doing it even here, taking a Broadway hit title and just expanding upon it.
Yeah, I think people have not noticed the extent to which Laurel and Hardy were parodists.
Mm.
It's a whole subsection of Laurel and Hardy, the parody aspect.
Yeah,
they can go from a nod like double Whoopee to something rather full scale like a Chump at Oxford, which people see in isolation, and it works in isolation. But if you see a Yank at Oxford, there are quite a few shots and things in it that ring bells. Oh, that's what they're doing.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I've not seen that one, so I'll have to look that one out just as a matter of interest. That's good.
Mm. Yeah, so there's the whole stream of that through Laurel and Hardy. Beau Chumps, aka Beau Hunks. That's a parody again, and of course, the Oliver the Eighth wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for the private life of Henry VIII.
I've always wondered why is it the private life of Oliver the Eighth? You stupid boy! Of course it is.
Yeah, well, I've never actually seen a print that was called the private life of Oliver the Eighth. I mean, somebody said it was called that at some point. And it said it's persisted, but all the prints I've seen are called Oliver the Eighth. So whether it was released in the UK as the private life of it, and then maybe that's how it gained currency, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I wonder if anybody else knows the answer to that one, because I've seen it often referred to as the private life of.
Yeah, and the Talking Pictures TV screenings are billed as that. At least
is it really?
At least I've seen the listings say Private Life of Oliver the Eighth, and I just think, no, it's just Oliver the Eighth. Yeah. But it's a title that's entered the public consciousness. And I'm not at all sure. I didn't see some film classics publicity for it in the 40s for those reissues where it's referred to as that. But their print,
right,
all just about manages to say Oliver the Eighth, because of course the plaque title card hangs on for so long and it cuts to the main title a bit too late. So you get more or less a flash frame of Oliver the Eighth before it goes into the director title.
Right.
But either way, I've never seen a print that's actually called The Private Life of. But anyway. But I digress. This whole parody thing. You mentioned the Laurel solos when he was obviously very into parodying then recent films. So the general feeling there, I think, is that he found it a useful framework on which to build a film because he was having such trouble in establishing a character of his own.
Yeah.
It gave him something to hang on to.
Yeah, and they always seem to be kind of his best solo work, I think, as well. When Nights Were Cold and Dr. Pickle and Mr. Pride. And all the rest of it.
Yeah, and even some of the ones that are less obviously so, West of Hot Dog, which is West of Pecos, and so on. It gave him a framework, gave him something to work from, since he had no real identity of his own.
Do you think that's sort of quite a vaudeville / music hall thing to do, to sort of parody popular stuff? Because I know a lot of people used to take on, it would imitate popular acts, well, like the Chaplin role, for instance. Was that something you think Stan brought with him from the stage to actually parody?
I think they had that. They had that sort of ongoing thread at Fred Carlo, because they would be sending up things. They weren't necessarily other theatrical things or films. They'd be general topics. They'd be topical stories like the sketch on the line they're called "The Won't Detain You."
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So yes, there was the parody instinct of whatever the source material. So I think, but it was pretty much a thing on the halls anyway. A measure of parodying things. And but yeah, I think we can see a bit of a line from Carno here with these.
Yeah.
With this so as you say, Chaplin did it as well, and
yeah, and everybody parodied Chaplin. Yeah,
or ripped him off.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty blatant, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do before we sort of discuss the film itself, Glenn, is just put it into a little bit of context. So we know that at the end of 1928, the studio shuts down, I think on the 28th of December, in readiness for the conversion to sound technology. And at that specific time, also, Leo McCarey resigns his post as supervising director and also vice president. And Ray Coffin, I think it's Coffin, it's spelt Coffin, it could be Kofar, who knows?
Could be. We're box over there.
Yeah, who was head of publicity at the studio and had been for, I think, 3 years. They both resigned, so it was quite a period of change for the studio. And what I'd like to just do is have a little bit of a look at Leo McCarey in a bit more detail, because I'm very consciously aware that we haven't done that on the podcast yet, is to actually give him a little bit more airtime, which I think is a bit naughty, because he obviously is a massive figure in the Laurel Hardy story.
Yes.
So as he's departing stage left, I think we should probably pay him a little tribute, if that's okay. Can I
just leap in quickly on that with vis-a-vis the chronology there? McCarey departed in December of 28. Yet apparently Double Whoopee was written in January of 29. So and Randy Skretlet says something about the copyright registration.
That's right.
So,
yes.
So something doesn't quite fit here.
Yes. That's right, yeah. I think Randy was talking about it, and I think he was saying whether or not McCarey left behind, a substantial amount of story ideas so that they credited back to McCarey. It's just it's a very grey area. We're not exactly sure. Yeah,
that makes the most sense there, because of course he would have been consistently writing and would have left quite a bit behind when he left the studio. So so there were quite possibly a number of some unfilmed McCarey ideas that were still on the desk when he left.
That's right. As we spoke about in Wrong Again, of course, there's the story where the studio contacted McCarey to say, "We've got nothing. What have you got? Have you got anything?" And he says, "Funnily enough, yes, I have."
But he was enormously important, Laurel and Hardy. I do think it's generally accepted now that he was the one who had the idea that these two together made an effective contrast and would make a good pairing.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty much unanimous these days that it was McCarey's idea.
Yeah,
I suppose perhaps one should look at how he had got to the position of the studio by that time. It's probably telling a lot of people a lot of what they already know here, but he'd originally been a law student and apparently had paid for that education with the damages he received out of falling down a lift shaft and breaking his legs.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's good for context, isn't it? That's
maybe that's where that business with the prince going down the lift shaft comes from.
Exactly, yeah.
To get ahead into Double Whoopee itself, but yeah, I mean, thinking about this in recent days, I thought, well, yeah, this does have a certain autobiographical quality to it.
Yeah, doesn't it just?
Yeah, but anyway, he obviously didn't pursue the law, tried to be a boxer.
Right.
That didn't go anywhere. Finished up working in films with Tom Browning, who persuaded him to be acted behind the camera instead of as an actor as he'd intended to be, because he had the looks. This was a man with leading man looks.
Yeah.
But he finished up behind the camera, and after Browning, he found himself at Hal Roach and was working with Charlie Chase when he decided to go back into performing. He'd been Director General or something at Roach, and he gave up that administrative position to return to being a star comic,
right,
with McCarey directing it.
Yeah.
And they moved into from one readers into two readers and became the really polished ones that made Chase's reputation, I suppose. And by this time, production was being supervised by F. Richard Jones, and Jones left in February 27 or thereabouts, early 27, and then Leo McCarey became the studio's supervising director. And of course, he'd left the Chase unit, in order to be this overall supervisor, and was thus in the position where he was the one to look at what was going on in production and say, these two are right together.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, that's roughly how McCary got to that position.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody will no doubt contact us and say, no, you got that wrong, Ben.
Well, they're more than welcome to.
This was where McCary was at that time. And of course, he became much sought after. He was noticed. And after departing from Roach, he became, a director, a sought after director. And he was carrying the style with him, the Roach style. There's a film called Let's Go Native from 1930, which has got a lot of McCary / Roach type material in it. And of course, back to Eddie Cantor again, because who do we have directing Eddie Cantor in the Kid from Spain in 1932, but Leo McCary.
Oh, wow. Well, Eddie Cantor's making a good cameo in this episode.
He's doing well. He'd be rolling his eyes with pleasure. But, McCary was directing a lot of high-profile comedians, W.C. Fields and Six of a Kind.
Mm-hmm.
Who else? Well,
Marx
Brothers, famously Duck Soup. Guess where that title came from? Yeah. I mean, McCary took that one over to a very large degree. There's an awful lot of Hal Roach. So there's a tit-for-tat exchange with Edgar Kennedy in it.
Yes.
That's how McCary this film is to a very large degree.
Hey, what's the idea of fighting in front of my place and driving my customers away?
Hey, mister, you got a mistake or someplace. I no fight. You understand that this guy, he's a worker for me. I ask him something, you not telling me nothing. I ask him why I not speak. All the time you not speak. What do you think he do? He make a fight to go like this.
Hey, what's the idea?
Oh, that's not my idea. That's his idea. All the time I say something, he not say nothing. Every time I speak...
Will you shut up? Hey, listen, what are you doing around here? Who are you? Hey, can't you say anything?
No, he not say nothing.
Shut up.
I am a shut up, but mister, you don't understand. Look, he's a spy and I'm a spy. He work for me. I want him to find out something, but he don't find out what I want to find out. Now, how am I going to find out what I want to find out if he don't find out what I got to find out?
Will you quit annoying me?
All right, I quit. All you got to do is make him stop doing this.
Oh. Now, just for that, I'm going to tear you limb from limb.
But yeah, I mean, the title, which is totally irrelevant to the Marx Brothers movie, was just repeated from a Laurel and Hardy that McCary was involved with. And of course, he became identified later on with the. I loathe the term screwball comedies because the people in the movie are to be anything but screwball, but they got called that. So but yeah. Suddenly we're talking about people like Cary Grant and so on, and of course some of the very worthy things, Bing Crosby, Going My Way, and the follow-up, The Bells of St Mary's, and later on he was rather worried about the communist menace and was doing anti-communist propaganda movies and so on. But he had this strong moral compass. Very much Catholic driven, I think. And I think that's what took McCary in that direction, what took him to the Bing Crosby movies and into that. That was his moral compass, I think, directing him.
Okay.
So
that's interesting.
So that's really how McCary got from a lawyer, erstwhile lawyer who broke his legs, to being an anti-communist propagandist. in a few bite-sized chunks.
There's a blueprint how to do it. If anybody wants to do it, there's the blueprint. Just as a matter of interest, obviously you've done the Laurel and Hardy Encyclopedia and the Marx Brothers Encyclopedia, and what is your thinking on McCary as a Marx Brothers director? I'd be quite interested to hear that, because I love Duck Soup, the Marx Brothers Duck Soup. I think it's fantastic, but I know there is a difference of opinion as to whether his style of comedy / directing suited the Marx Brothers, just generally. What are your thoughts on that, Glenn?
I think it works too well for me to quibble, really. It's the most efficient of all their films. That's for sure. I mean, the ones before McCary have a habit of rambling and shambling. Norman MacLeod was very good, and I think his strength was in letting him get on with it and just keeping the show held together. it's a matter, I think it's the difference between controlling and propelling.
Yeah.
Yeah. MacLeod could just about control them. Victor Herman before him tried, and but no, I think Robert MacLeod was a kind of an efficient referee, but McCary really wanted to do something to drive it. And I think it works really well because he doesn't try to change them.
Yeah.
He doesn't change Groucho's approach. I mean, an awful lot of the stuff with Groucho and Zeppo could be out of Animal Crackers.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing. But what he gives Harpo and Chico to do really, I think, expands them because they still do the usual things.
Yes. Yeah.
But he gives them a lot more of a visual framework in which to be what they were.
Yeah.
They're doing a Laurel and Hardy like break-in scene.
Yeah.
But they do it from their own motivations.
Yes. Yeah.
And Laurel and Hardy are setting out to be stealthy, whereas Harpo doesn't care. Harpo and Chicken, they don't care.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the key difference there. And it's the same kind of business, but each driven by totally different motivation on the part of the characters, and McCary saw the difference.
Yeah,
he saw how it could translate, but using the characters, and he didn't compromise their characterizations in any way whatsoever.
Yes.
Which frankly is more than you can say for the later MGMs, even the good ones.
Yeah, yeah.
They did compromise the Marx Brothers characters very seriously,
and the Laurel and Hardy ones too. Really, yeah.
Well, yes, even more so. At least the Marx Brothers got some good films out of it, but
that's right.
Laurel and Hardy didn't.
Yeah, this is really true. Very true. That's interesting, and I mean, I suppose it comes back to, I think the talking about characterization, and he gave them, Roach style comedy to do in effect, but protecting those characters, and I guess. I really feel that with McCary's input with the Laurel and Hardy characters, just bringing it back to the boys, that he was very instrumental in providing a lot of their mannerisms and slowing the comedy down.
Yes.
And from Soup to Nuts, when the face goes in the cake, there's that sort of famous story where McCary shouts, "Freeze! Don't move, just relax and bring your face out of it," and all that kind of. I think it's really. I guess McCary was obviously a very character-driven director, if that's the right terminology.
And the progression had been seen earlier with the Charlie Chase films he was directing. The one-reelers are more in the accepted form. They are a bit more fast-moving, a bit more gag-driven, but it doesn't take very long for them to slow down and to take it more realistically. And give it time. And this became all the more pronounced when the series went into two reels because, of course, they had more of the luxury, more running time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the same thing happened as Laurel and Hardy developed, as it happened when Chase moved from the Jimmy Jump one-reelers into the more mature two-reelers. It was the same principle.
Yeah.
And I think McCary had an awful lot to do with both. I think, in fairness, one should say McCary with Chase progressing together, I think.
That's a good point, actually. And funnily enough, I was doing a little bit of research on McCary fairly recently, and I was looking in the trade papers, and they were reporting. I've got it here actually. Moving Picture World, June 26th, 1925, and it talks about the Chase McCary team. Establishing a unique record of going up to two-reelers after less than 1 year of one-reel production. So they're obviously acknowledging that is quite a transition in a short space of time for Chase. Yeah,
very much so. And so I think he did the same for Laurel and Hardy. He had done with Chase. So he used the word "with."
Yeah.
So it was a logical thing to do with Laurel and Hardy, and they recognised that what they got here were two characters who were not quick thinkers.
You know what we could do? We could go way, way out west, where they'd never find us.
Out west where?
Oh, Philadelphia, Jersey City. Any of those places where they have no exposition laws.
What do you mean, no exposition laws?
Well, if the police found out where we were, they could come and get us if we didn't want them to
If they knew, that's a very, very, very good idea.
And
that's right.
So they're going to need time.
Yes.
And the audience knows that. So the audience can watch the thought processes, if you like.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's the difference. That's the difference between Slipping Wives and big business in a way.
Yeah.
How the anchors are put on, and it calms down.
I think that's kind of the beauty of, well, one of the beautiful things about Laurel and Hardy's comedy is the fact that it is slow, mostly, for the most part. Obviously, there are other moments, and you can relax into it. You can relax into the films where it's not frantic, it's not hitting you over the head with it. You can actually just comfortably sit and watch it and digest it, soak it up, and it's just, it just works.
You're just carried along by it.
Yeah.
You can't be carried along by the Keystone Cops.
No, exactly.
Not Dovey yet.
You could be dragged by them.
Dragged by them.
So I think just going back to McCary himself, a massive influence on creating the team and their style of comedy, and then there's that transition between. I know Stan was under the wing of F. Richard Jones when he first arrived at the studio.
Yes, he was being trained by Jones as a director.
Yeah, he had a big impact on him. And then I think likewise, McCary seemed to have the same influence over Stan as well, in terms of the direction to take the team, the characters. And then when McCary leaves, it's pretty much Stan on his own then, who's going to take them forward, but in that mould. Would you say that's a fair summation?
I would agree entirely, yes. He had the training from Jones and McCary. And I don't think he could have done it, say, in 1924.
Yeah.
Let's say that. But from training under Jones from 25 onwards and working with McCary and pooling ideas and essentially finding himself in harmony with those ideas and contributing himself, I think by that time, the Jones-McCary influence had reached the point where he could take it over pretty much solo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point I think Richard Ban made when I was chatting to him last about how we all, it's quite a known terminology that Stan was the director's director, in effect, apart from when McCary was in the chair. And
yes.
I think Hal Roach told Richard he would never say anything to McCary. He wouldn't argue with him. He wouldn't negate anything. That was law. Whatever McCary said was fine. But anybody else, he'll mix it up with. But McCary was like God, to Stan, which is,
I think each of us has somebody like that in our field of activities at some point or other.
Yeah.
Someone in whom one has complete confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sort of mentor character. Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And and I think that was very much the case between Stan Laurel and Leo McCary. Stan had total confidence in him and was, just so convinced that he knew what he was doing that he wouldn't question it. And I think there probably weren't too many other people like that.
No, that's right. And it's just reminded me, the This Is Your Life episode that came out, the response that Stan has to Leo McCary coming out on stage.
Yes.
He brightens up for the first time, probably the only time in the whole piece.
Yes,
but you could see that warmth.
Yeah, they're both delighted to see him. You can, and it's about the only time in the whole program that Stan genuinely seems pleased to see somebody.
Well, by the mid-1920s, both of you are in Hollywood. Your paths destined soon to cross at the Hal Roach studio.
As Oliver Norval Hardy tells it, a leg of lamb brought them together.
I don't know if you recognize that voice, Mr. Laurel or Mr. Hardy. You should. At the time, he was production supervisor at the Hal Roach Studios, and later he worked on your pictures, now known the world over as the famous writer-director of Going My Way, Bells of St. Mary's, My Son John, many, many more great hits, your good friend, director Leo McCary. Here's Leo. Oh, look, Leo, how did a leg of lamb Sit down, Oliver, and we're going to get that a boy. How did a leg of lamb bring Laurel and Hardy together, eh?
Well, it seems that Babe was cooking a leg of lamb, and for some reason he left his arm in the oven too long or something. And he got it so badly blistered that we had to cut down his part in the next picture, so we decided to put Stan in the picture, too, to bolster up the comedy. Yeah. So when we saw the two of them on the screen together, we decided there's a real team.
You bet.
And from that time on, they really went places, all on account of Hardy had a little lamb.
Oh, and that was the beginning of these famous hats. Leo, you know how to work these better than I. Give them to the boys.
Sure.
Oliver, stand up, please, and just put them up. Stand up, Mr. Hardy. Yeah, did they got the right ones? I'm not sure. No. No, that is that the right? No, that's no. I think they're the. Oh my!
Yeah, it's a lovely moment.
Yeah, the warmth there is, tangible.
I think it's worth sitting through that episode just for that moment. I think it is.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a real nice. Yeah.
Yeah, despite the undoubted attractions of the Hazel Bishop beauty box.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's good. Very good. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've got any more notes on McCary, actually. I mean, obviously, we could probably do a whole episode on Leo McCary. And
get a series out of it.
Should. But, so the other chap was Ray Coffin, or Coffin. I'll give him a nice French sound. So Ray Coffin, he was also president of Wampus in 1927, about 1927 to 29. He was quite a big deal, apparently, in the publicity field for various companies. I think starting at Senis, although I don't have that in my notes here. But he eventually found his way to the Roach Studios, and he was tasked with taking the Our Gang kids and their parents and guardians on a 3-month personal appearance tour of the theatres of the Eastern States, starting in September 1928. So this is getting towards the end of his employment with Roach. But according to reports in the trade papers, during the tour, Coffin was arrested in Brooklyn as he came off stage in the middle of Our Gang's performance. It was a children's protective organisation. Had gotten wind that the special licence for the children to work had expired the previous day, and they were there waiting for it to come off the stage. So, we listened about the Buster Keaton early days.
Just thinking about
child protection. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it looks as if he was arrested in Brooklyn. So I found that wonderful. And just a few months later, he decided to leave.
Yes, well, I'll be talking cause and effect. Yeah, it sounds like that.
But that's good stuff. But I think I'm trying to remember now. I'm sure the story goes on to say that they managed to actually escape, and that they just disappeared. They got out of there quickly, so he didn't have to sort of go to prison, stand trial, or whatever was ahead of him. So
I've just got a mental picture now of W.C. Fields galloping to the state line to escape arrest.
Yeah, but that was in Motion Picture News in June 1929. If anyone wants to look it up, it's a really interesting little piece. But is it true? How true is it? Who knows? It might have just been a bit of spin from the studio just for an interesting story to get them in the papers.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, somebody comes up with a good story, nobody's going to deny it. And and if you're talking somebody whose raison d'etre was publicity.
Exactly, yes. That's a good point, actually. Yeah, I never thought of that. So the studio shuts down for a month. They reopen again at the end of January 28th. The work carries on until March, I believe, early March, the construction work, which was put down in Thomas Benton Roberts' hands.
Oh, yes.
Keep it in-house, keep it cheap, which
of course. Yes.
And filming begins on the 5th of December, as we said, until the 5th of February, until the 9th of February. And the film finally gets released on the 18th of May, 1929. So,
and they did it on the cheap because there's no track, no music and effects track. This all big business.
That's right. Yes. Now, is that? Do you think that's cost saving because of the expense they're going to for the conversion to sound?
I think it's probable. It's certainly ironic that they suddenly suspend music and effects tracks just as the sound equipment's coming in.
Yeah.
And unless, of course, there's a parallel thing going on. They're not going to get disc tracks made up and effects tracks made up in the first place because they're working with the sound equipment installing it. Maybe.
Yeah, that's possible. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so because I think it was done at their end rather than GM's end because it was Victor.
Yeah,
and that's who Roach had engaged to do his sound.
Yeah.
So maybe that was it. There was a hiatus in these tracks because they were fitting out for sound, and the equipment wasn't necessarily available.
Because I don't think Bacon Grabbers or Angora Love has a score either.
They have. They have.
Have they?
They just don't use them.
They don't.
Yeah, to my irritation. No, they're
full orchestral score, is it?
Oh no. Again, on the cheap. The orchestral soundtracks have made way for a theatre organ.
Right.
So they've gone sound, and the quality of the M&E tracks, musical effects tracks, has plummeted from an orchestra to a theatre organ plus effects. They are not very good, I have to say.
No.
They're okay, but they can't compare to the earlier musical effects tracks. And
no.
So I can only assume that's why there's been a tendency not to use them for things like DVDs. But I made noises about it. I wanted the original tracks used. But
I think that's a fair comment, really. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of organ scores. I must admit, I don't go in for the Wurlitzer type of thing.
No.
I do love the original orchestral scores. I think they give so much to the films and the comedy.
Yes, they do.
Especially when you understand, I know we've talked about the scores before, the actual names of the songs and the tunes that they're using, how they fit with the gags they're putting forward. It's just wonderful.
There's an element of that in the organ scores, I should say, though, because they do interpolate punning themes.
Right. Okay.
In Bacon Grabbers, where the boy and the dog turn up, the music switches to a tune called "The Whistler and His Dog."
Oh.
Okay. So it does continue. It's just the ideas are there. It's just the execution isn't so hot. And goodness knows, people have this thing about the mighty Wurlitzer theatre organs, how wonderful they are, and you press this key and pull that bit, and you can get a train whistle, or you can get this, and this. I hate theatre organs. I hate organs. I have always hated them. I find them immensely depressing.
Yes.
No matter who's doing what with them, I just find organ recordings horrible. For decades, year in, year out, Radio 2 had this regular slot called The Organist Entertains.
Yes, that's right.
Which I always found immensely depressing. I always felt that the title should have a question mark.
Yeah.
I mean, really. No, music to slash your wrist by. It's not going to sing something simple.
Yeah, I agree. But I really believe that it's down to the score and what type of music it is that makes people decide, do I like silent film, silent comedy or not? And I think there's so many times. There was I don't know if you remember the old Virgin video cassettes. Well, you will remember them, I'm sure you will. And there was one called Archive Rarities. Do you remember that one?
I compiled it.
Did you compile it? Were you in charge of the music on it? Because it was awful. Oh, but it was awful. It was such a dirge. Yeah. And I just thought, and I can hear it to this day, but I hated the thing. I hated it. And I do think, and it really put me off watching silent films, because some of the tracks that were put onto the Vision videos, again, were just horrible tracks.
For the regular silent shorts, that was the music put on for German TV. The beta film people who held the rights, those were the scores they had for the copies they distributed to television, which were not shown in Britain until later on, and very few of them. But their standard European for TV copies had those scores. The Archive Rarities thing was another matter. Again, that was produced in-house, and I had no involvement with the choice of music. But I was just asked to put this thing together. That was all.
Well, it was a great video. I loved the visuals. Was wonderful. But, the music, no.
It was terrible. Yeah. But no, it's absolutely true though, because a lot of silent film revivals over the years had some pretty ghastly music put on them, and this notion of plinky plink piano and so on, and even what I might call the misuse of good music even now, on occasion, I find a silent film coming up that's got Scott Joplin under it.
Yeah.
Now, we are talking wonderful music here.
Yes.
But it's not right for every silent movie that was ever made, and not right for most of them, truth be told. But this idea persists, or has persisted, that's the type of thing to stick on to accompany a silent film. No, they don't really belong together. Individually, they're brilliant, but there's not natural bedfellows. But and some of them there were overly jokey orchestral scores put on things, facetious music, which is bad enough for comedies, even worse for dramas when they're sending it out. But it can put people off. A lot of people were put off by the music in the early 70s Chaplin shorts series that the BBC did.
Right.
They felt it was too, serious, I suppose.
Yeah.
I understood the motives for it. They wanted to get away from the self-consciously comedy music, and so they were playing it straight. But I felt that there was much of the time they were scoring as though for drama rather than for comedy. You can have music that isn't facetious but still light, and I felt most of them lacked lightness. And people at the time were saying to me, "Oh, this is dreary music," and a lot of the time I had to agree with them. I mean, they weren't all bad, and some of them stood out. The scores for The Vagabond in particular was wonderful. It was a lovely score. The Immigrant, which is the one they kicked off with in the first one they showed, very nicely done, and some others. But there were a number of them where I just felt they were taking it too seriously. It wasn't light enough for a comedy.
Yes.
So you've got the two ends. You've got the overly facetious that puts people off, and you've got the overly reverent that does the same.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
It's a balance.
If you look at, and actually that's a really nice moment just to mention the recently departed Carl Davis, of course.
Oh, yes.
His scores for Harold Lloyd comedies, especially, are just wonderful to listen to. In the Hollywood series, I'm sure that was Carl Davis that did the soundtrack for that as well.
It was. I've got the album.
Yes, I have got the album as well.
Yeah, it does tell. It must have sold a fair few at the time, because you do see it quite often.
Yeah, I'll put it on when I'm writing. I'll put that on quite often and just have it playing in the background. It's lovely, beautiful music. The theme tune especially is just wonderful.
Yes,
so
sweeping things.
Yeah, definitely. But I think just going back to the original point, it really does put people off silent films. I think that is the make or break, because the actual visuals, the Laurel and Hardy itself, is exactly the same as in a talkie. It's very physical humour, beautiful characters. But with that music, the wrong music over the top, it can just kill it and put people off. They won't give it a few minutes just to, I don't know.
No, it's the same with any silent film, and Laurel and Hardy, no exception. You can kill a Laurel and Hardy silent with the wrong music.
Ignore him. Just one of the lower elements.
So Double Whoopee. Let's get on to the film. Glenn, what are your thoughts on the film itself, Double Whoopee? Is it one that you like? Do you watch it often?
It's one I've always liked. I probably haven't watched it as often as some of the other ones, probably because we've all been shown the Harlow bit so often. And you think, do I want to watch that for the nth time? But it's one I've always enjoyed, and it was one that I had a copy of as a youngster, like so many of them. The first copy I had of it was a one-reel cut-down Standard 8 Arrow films.
Right.
Because there were some of the Laurel and Hardy silents you could get in the full two-reel versions fairly easily, and some you couldn't. And some, if you're lucky, you found an older print. But the ones that are current at that time, I'm talking about beginning of 70s, tend to be one-reel cut-downs and usually Arrow. The quality on Arrow's prints, by the way, was often startling, and I feel that they probably were not drawing as some did from 16mm Blackhawk. They had something better. They had 35, and I often wonder what became of their materials.
Yeah.
So if anybody knows, please tell me. But I don't think anybody does know. Arrow's print remade all the intertitles for some reason. They did tend to quite often, not always. And why they did this, I don't know, because they've always been around. They've never been around from freeze flame replacements or anything like that. And they made a goof on at least one of them. At the beginning, His Highness has arrived, had lost its D. His Highness has arrived, it says.
Oh dear.
Oh dear. So that was the copy I had when I was about 13, I suppose. And later on, acquired a second-hand Blackhawk print, which did turn up. They did tend to turn up. So eventually got the two real Standard 8 again. I'm going Standard 8 Defender. Yeah. But no, I watched it a fair few times over the years, and I'm very fond of it. I don't see it as one of the top echelon Laurel and Hardys, but it's still very accomplished, and a lot of good things going on in it. And looking at it again in preparation for this podcast, I found myself laughing aloud at things, even I remembered them. Because, of course, that's one of the great things with Laurel and Hardy. They do bear repetition so much because of the fact that they're based on anticipation rather than delivery.
Yeah.
You still savour the build-up.
That's right.
You know what's going to happen, but the humour is not in the payoff. It's in how they do it.
Yes.
Just the sheer joy of watching them do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are two, I think there's two at least, parts in the film where they introduce the signing the names, which reappears, and also I think there's the bit where Ollie sort of stops Stan. No, me first, and then you. I'm not sure that's the first time, but it's certainly a really good. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it echoes from Soup to Nuts, their arrival.
Yes, yeah, of course it does.
But it's not immediately known that they are not the people one was hoping for.
Yes.
The letter of introduction and all this.
Oh, well, we are from the employment agency.
Oh, yes.
We're the best they could do at the last moment.
So I can see.
But yes, I mean, the signing the register business turns up again in any old port.
What kind of a room do you want?
We'd like to see your floor plan, please.
Floor plan?
Yes, sir. We'd like a room with a southern explosion.
Not explosion, exposure.
And Everson picked up on something interesting there, in that version, it's actually made the funnier because of the flea pit setting, this flea bag of a hotel. Doing it in a grand hotel, the Grand Manor in a grand hotel fits. Doing it in a run-down waterfront dive doesn't.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they just make it the funny. You're right.
Yeah, the incongruity factor, and but they're both funny. Both versions are funny. Bullfighters does it again, but it's just brief. It's done almost as a throwaway, and it's done in character, like most of the Laurel and Hardy business in Bullfighters. Unlike just about all the rest of the post-Roach films, the way they do it. It's in keeping, and the X and the nice little touch with the stamp, Peoria, Illinois, and Stan's contented reaction to that. That's in keeping. When they do it, well, they did it a couple of years earlier in Air Raid Wardens. My God, there's MGM not getting them. Yeah, and making it all about up front. Ollie tells Stan,
not an X. Sign your name.
Not to sign with an X, but to put his name. And then what have we got there? Instead of all the elaborate preparation building up to that, we've got Stan being victimized. He's being pointed up as somebody who has learning difficulties. And he can hit his distress at trying to do this. He's whimpering. We're supposed to laugh at that. Whereas in the other versions, particularly in Double Whoopee, he doesn't mind. It's not important to him that he can't write. He's not concerned. He's just happy to put an X at the end after all that preparation and thinks that's sufficient. He's happy with that. And that's the difference. That is the world of difference, which is probably why some of us feel that MGM in the 40s treated Laurel and Hardy even more appallingly than Fox did in what they did with them. But this, anyway, I think they go back to Double Whoopee here. I'm getting depressed.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the 40s episodes. I've got to say, it's going to be it's going to be a scream, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe we should get sponsorship from a firm of tranquilizer makers or something.
That's right. Yeah, definitely. Louis R. Foster is the director in the director's chair.
Yes, a novice of well, not really a novice, but still a relative newcomer, and I think a good early example of them having a director who would keep it running but would listen to Stan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Which is why, but actually going back, as one shouldn't, to the post-Roach films, immediately prior to the departure from Roach, who have they got directing Saps at Sea but Gordon Douglas, who was still a junior director.
Right.
Cut his teeth on the Our Gangs, picked up an Oscar, which was really for the series rather than for the film itself, Board of Education.
Right.
But an example, again, of a much younger, less experienced director who would listen to Stan.
Yeah. It seems to be a strategy, doesn't it, really?
Yeah. I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So yeah, I think Louis Foster was in that category. I mean, he knew what he was doing. Wasn't with them all that long, which is quite interesting. Jimmy Parrott back soon afterwards.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can say with any degree of certainty that Foster had any particular style of his own to bring to it. Certainly not at that point in his career.
Yeah. But at least he didn't do an Emmett Flynn on us. It could have been worse.
Yes, quite. I mean, yes. Well, once again, we won't go into that.
We won't go into that. No, we've done that one to death already.
Yeah, but this was Foster's first full film as a director, rather than being an assistant.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. This was his his debut as a solo.
Not a bad debut.
Not bad at all. Not at all. He again was somebody who started out intending to be something else professionally. He intended to be a journalist. Came from Missouri. I think he started in journalism in Missouri and finished up, getting into films instead, and worked his way up the ranks at Hal Roach. I think he'd been fairly down the pecking order in what he did there, wasn't he doing things like carpentry or sets or something before then? I need to check that, but I think he was one who started very much as a junior at Roach and just ascended.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah,
made his way up to assistant director and then full director.
Yes, no, I think you're right there.
So from Foster's point of view, this is an important film. His real directorial debut.
Yes, yes.
But how important is it? I've told this to a few people on and off. Most recently in a webinar. Who really mattered on the set, and I remember there was a bootleg DVD of Birthmarks. These single volume cover is probably not the word, but these indeterminate origin things. That circulate, found in pound shops or whatever.
Yes,
this 1-2 reeler on a DVD, and this was Birthmarks, and whoever did the packaging design of this had bought into the whole auteur thing. And it actually says on the front, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy in Louis R. Foster's Birthmarks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which I found hilarious.
He'd be pleased with that, wouldn't he?
I'd be delighted, I'm sure. But, obviously, this was his personal vision.
I love it. That's good. That's really good.
Oh, Lord. So, yeah, for me, it's always, ever since it's been Louis R. Foster's Birthmarks. I personally wouldn't have owned up to it, but there we go.
Oh, no, this is true. Yeah, I used to have a VHS of just Birthmarks. Yeah, I wonder if it's the same one. I can't remember the packaging. It was pink, I remember.
Yeah, this was a DVD, which I think was
DVD.
Yeah, this was a direct descendant, I think, of that single volume VHS.
Probably.
Yeah. It shows that evolution can work in reverse.
So we've got Stan and Ollie as staff at the Frontenac Hotel. Ollie's the doorman. Well, I suppose they're both doormen, aren't they?
Well, they're both on the door, yeah. But I wonder if Stan should really be there because he's a footman.
Yeah, I was going to say he's not exactly a doorman, is he? Ollie's the doorman. That's right. Yes, he's the footman.
Yeah. Who was it? Who was it who picked up on the parallel between Ollie as doorman and Emil Jannings in The Last Laugh? Who picked that up?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't heard that one.
Somebody did. But it's a fair point, actually. And again, we're back to the parody thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it was a big picture, a German film that did well overseas, which is why it's better known by its English title, The Last Laugh, rather than Der letzte Mann. And it was a very big film and made quite an impact. Drew, unless I've misremembered this, it made quite a stir because it was a silent feature that had no intertitles, didn't need them.
Right, okay.
Quite an achievement. And
The Last Laugh?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Yeah, and there is something reminiscent of Jannings as this doorman in Ollie as doorman in Double Whoopee. So it's very easy to read these things in.
Yes,
things that may be coincidental.
Yeah,
but they were in the film business. They knew what was going on out there, and they weren't existing in a bubble.
No, exactly.
And they weren't above sending up things that were in features. So yeah. So I can't remember who picked this up, but when I saw this, I thought, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll look that up. Yeah, that's interesting. And we have repetition of gags again. We've got the lift shaft with what's his name? Erich von Stroheim's double.
Yes. Who's
Hans Joby, John Peters.
Yeah, Captain John Peters.
John Peters.
As he started to become known, which is probably easier for many people to pronounce in English-speaking countries, particularly over in Hollywood, where they are a bit more isolated. But yeah, Hans Joby. Yeah, who was they say he was Austrian, but he was from a bit of Austria-Hungary that became Romanian territory or something, because it's easy to forget how vast the Austro-Hungarian Empire was.
Yeah.
You read the earlier bios with Billy Wilder and say born Austria, but the bit he was born in is actually now in Poland.
Right.
It was a vast sprawling empire that got chopped up incredibly after the First World War. So, and they were, in many ways, in many respects, they were reverting to the territories that they'd been really before Austria-Hungary has swallowed everything. So, but yeah, that was him, and he was Stroheim's double, genuine double, because Stan Laurel, when asked about him, he couldn't remember his name, only that he was actually Stroheim's double, and he did do it for Stroheim at least in the latter 20s. Apparently, it is him in the Wedding March. And I don't know if there's anything earlier. I don't know that well, but he's guying Stroheim as in the things like Foolish Wives. Of course, guess who's on the receiving end of Stroheim's attentions there? But Mae Bush.
Oh, right, okay.
Those who love the game of connections.
Yes, absolutely right. Yeah, love it.
Yeah,
that's good.
But he was a bit of a joke in the industry, certainly in Hollywood by that time, because he'd come unstuck so much with his massively over elaborate productions that went ludicrously over budget, kept getting the fire from studios, and the films were too long to be commercially viable, from the hack down and so on. And he was becoming, a man on the decline by then. And I think he was considered fair game for satire because of the excesses, I suppose. And this had been going on for some time, and Ben Turpin had been sending him up for years.
Right.
Oh, yeah, and he's wonderful, actually. Turpin Stroheim is a joy to behold.
I've not seen that. That's good.
Oh, there are a few of them. Oh, yeah, Turpin got some mileage out of that. Oh, yeah, he did it a few times. And so check them out. They're worth seeing. So yes, there was a precedent for lampooning Erich von Stroheim in silent comedy. But who better but Stroheim's actual double?
Double, yeah. It's quite a scoop to actually get him, I suppose. That's because I guess they could have got Ben Turpin to do it.
Oh boy! No, only if the one of the plumbing put the wrong way around.
Exactly.
Yeah, the one who'd stand married to Ollie. Who knows? But
he's looking at me. I love that. It's such a good film.
It's great great stuff. And, but no, I mean, I don't suppose it was too much of a stretch to get Stroheim's actual double because he was just a jobbing actor.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and the way Stroheim's career was going at that point, there probably wouldn't have been much work for him dubbing for it.
He could have got Stroheim himself, probably.
Well, you never know. I think it's rather unlikely, but I like the idea of it.
Yes, but he gets dumped down the lift shaft. Is it 3 times? I'm pretty sure it's just 3 times that he gets dumped down in the end.
Probably right. 3. Yeah, I've never counted.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But what I love about that is that Stan and Babe are so oblivious to it.
Yes, well, that's it. They're totally unaware. Yes, they're the unwitting cause of it, and of course they compound it by coming down in the lift.
Yeah,
they make it even worse. They're totally oblivious, as you say.
Yeah, because of course the footman and the doorman shouldn't be coming down in the lift, should they?
No, they should be using.
Or coming in through the front door. That's right. Yeah,
they should be using the staff entrance, and so there they are in the lobby, along with the VIPs, and which is why at the beginning they are taken to be these VIPs.
Yes.
Yeah. And
the way Ollie carries himself across the across the room.
Yeah, and they picked up on how he had developed as a character. He did conduct himself like he was a prince or higher, or at the very least a knight of old. He could have been, he if you don't mind mixing up legends and literature and what have you, if you could imagine Sir Toby Belch playing Sir Lancelot. Something like that. Or maybe Falstaff, but
yes,
but yes, he carries himself like a nobleman, and they knew that that's how he developed as this character. So yes, he could very easily be taken for a VIP. And it's a funny thing, the relationship between them fits that, because you've got Stan essentially as Ollie's factotum.
Yes.
So you could take him to be his,
Prime Minister.
As Prime Minister assistant, whatever. But here's the thing: why on earth did they think that the actual Prime Minister to the Prince would behave like a valet? He's behaving like a valet. He's brushing the man off. Whereas a Prime Minister, of course, is a VIP in his own right.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, so maybe this was just, Hollywood's, if not America's, misconception of how that sort of role in a monarchy should work.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Their perception. If you're not the head of state, then you're not a VIP. If you're not the president, a prime minister is seen attached to a monarchy is perhaps viewed as this kind of subservient figure.
Yeah,
a Ruritanian type of thing.
Yeah, well, that's a contentious issue. We better not get too deep into that one.
No, I'm just saying that. It probably is, but
you're right, though.
Yeah, think about it from the point of view of a republic.
Yeah,
how would you view somebody directly answerable, you think, to a monarch? Because that didn't look like it's going to be a constitutional monarchy to me.
No, that's true. That's very true. Man, do you think there was enough Englishmen on the staff to say, hang on, this doesn't fit?
Yeah, well, I thought that about a few things in these, actually.
Yeah.
Come on, there are enough Brits on the lot to say, look, no.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
But they never do, and that's still true now. And I'm not going to name anything, but I've seen things produced in America in far more recent years where I know there've been Brits around, and the representation of the English in particular, you wonder why nobody there said, look, just a moment.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. And another a gag that gets repeated is the whistle on Ollie's uniform, which is just brilliant. I mean, the interaction between, and this is Charlie Hall, of course, who, apart from what would I say, leave him laughing. He hasn't had big roles in the boys' films yet, but this is probably one of his biggest and best to date, I would say.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, because we're talking about ascending through the ranks, what he did in terms of the supporting players.
Yeah.
And it's probably his best role in these to date, as you say, and we're already getting him engaging them in tit for tat stuff.
Yes, that's right. This is the first tit for tat with them, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Pardon me.
Are you Mr. Hall?
That's the name.
Good morning, Mr. Hall. I'm Mr. Hardy, and this is my partner, Mr. Laurel.
Is that so?
We're opening an electrical store next door.
So what?
What's he looking at?
Remember that fellow that we met in the trailer? Remember his wife came in and she asked for a drink of water?
La 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 la.
Pom pom.
Yeah, and interacting with Tiny Sanford, of course.
Yeah.
And and the wonderful thing about that, because got all that business between Hall and Sanford, and of course, Charlie Hall gets out because things are getting a bit rough.
You blued it again, sweetheart.
but they give us enough time to forget about that.
Yeah.
And then when the mayhem really kicks off in the hotel lobby, Hall runs on, still being pursued by Tony Sanford. We'd forgotten that was going on between them. They're still trying to get away from the cop.
That's right, yeah. Another little payoff. Yeah. That's brilliant. That's good. I do like. I think spotting Charlie Hall is one of the best games I think you can play when watching any Laurel Hardy film, because he's always there somewhere, isn't he?
Oh yeah.
I'll watch a film that I haven't seen for ages. He's there again in the background. Because it always makes people, when you say Charlie Hall was in the most amount of Laurel and Hardy films for a supporting actor. No, that can't be right. It's got to be Finlayson or somebody like that. But no, he's there.
He's there. I couldn't recognise him with Love and Hisses until eventually seeing a good print.
Love and Hisses. Oh yes, he's in. Yeah.
He's in there.
He's a soldier, I think, isn't he? In that?
Yeah.
He's one of the extras. Yeah.
He's just there.
That's
he's
right.
not really doing anything, and he's in all manner of things that ropes that people don't notice. I mean, the one of the Will Rogers things from 1924. And I forget. I think it's Big Moments from Little Pictures, because he did two that were very similar, Uncensored Movies and Big Moments from Little Pictures, where he's doing individual vignettes, sending up specific films, or in this particular case, a genre. And he does the Keystone Cops.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Rogers is made up to resemble Ford Sterling. He's doing all Ford Sterling's gestures and jumps and things. And among the ensemble of cops is Charlie Hall.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's doing it. I'm not too sure he's meant to look like Chaplin, actually. I think they have the tash, but yeah, so Hall spotting goes back far further than the Laurel and Hardys.
Yeah, I was watching. I think it was at Christmas. I was watching Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers in. Was it Carefree? I think it was Carefree or something like that. And in pops Charlie Hall.
Oh, yeah.
which was a delightful thing to see. I mean, I love Fred Astaire films anyway, but to see Charlie pop up is just great.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's always a bonus. And when you think, Sherlock Holmes, the Dress to Kill, a.k.a. Sherlock Holmes and the Secret Code is in that. I think he's...
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and I think it was the last of that series. And... and actually a great place for Hall spotting is, and for other roach faces actually, the RKO two-reelers. An awful lot of ex-roach faces turn up in those.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Charlie Hall did some nice business with Edgar Kennedy in some of them, and Anita Garvin's in there, Vivian Oakland.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. When things had been changing rather, the RKO Shorts unit seemed to have become a bit of an alternate haven for Hal Roach people.
Oh, I didn't know that. So when do they date from?
Oh, between the 30s and 40s.
Okay.
They trickled on into the 50s, but for the spotting of Roach faces, 30s and 40s, particularly 30s. Finlayson's in some.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, not just with expected people like Ed Kennedy, but Clark and McCulloch, and so on. I did a thing about those a long time ago for radio, a two-parter for Radio 4 called the RKO Gang.
Right.
This was partly in recollection of the great blitz that BBC had of showing these shorts. And there was a reason for that. The BBC, I don't know if it's still the case, but I understood that they had the UK transmission rights to the RKO library in perpetuity. So I was told.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they'd shown a number of these things, shorts and features over the years. And then sometime in the 80s, they realised they had a vast stockpile of negatives on them that had never been printed up.
Wow.
So circa 1988, 9 or something, they got them all out and had them all printed up and were showing them. And they had these terribly inconveniently scheduled screenings, like 6:30 in the morning, Monday to Friday. Oof. I know. I just set the video, obviously. Even though I was getting up early in those days to go to the work at the band at the same laboratory where they were having them printed up.
Fancy that.
Yeah. So I knew what was going on.
Yeah. Brilliant.
They were having printed up, and so when they actually turned up on BBC Two and those slots, I wasn't surprised, except the fact they were actually showing so many of them in one go. But I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this. But
so I wonder if that was something to do with Henry Ginsberg then, around that sort of time when he's cutting salaries, getting rid of folks. Is that sort of like a mass exodus of those kind of supporting players to RKO? Or
a bit of both. I mean, Kennedy was one who got the chop and went to RKO, and he got his own series, so it wasn't to his detriment really.
Yeah.
It was a series that ran for the rest of his life, so he was okay, and he got some feature work. I don't know how many of them were just not getting roles at Roach because of a change in policy, or I don't know. Some of them were got rid of, but some people, I don't know, they just weren't getting the roles perhaps as often as they were, and it wasn't as if there was a total blanket ban on them or anything like that. They weren't.
Yeah.
They hadn't been ejected permanently. Yeah. I mean, Vivian Oakland turns up again, of course, in Way Out West.
Yes, of course.
That sort of thing, having last appeared with Laurel Hardy in Scram, I think. But they're all drumming actors, and they got what they could at different studios.
Okay.
Vivian Oakland again. She turns up at Warner's for a mid-30s sound short called Keystone Hotel.
Right.
So actually, Oakland spotting is quite fun too.
I've not started that one yet. I'll make a note when I finish Hall spotting. We'll do that.
Yeah. But at the end of the 30s, she had a stint playing Eggy Kennedy's wife in his series.
Oh right, yeah.
Because the original woman, Florence. Anyway, she left, and I think Vivian Oakland took over for a bit, and Nita Garvin maybe did one or two, but she was appearing with Leon Errol for a while in the Kennedy RKO shorts. And then the original Florence came back. But yeah, Vivian Oakland for a while was the regular Mrs. Kennedy.
Mrs. Kennedy.
That was Mrs. Kennedy. Well, what's the matter?
I was wondering who it was.
I knew I could count on you to bring me that line, and that's good. So let's bring it back to Double Whoopee. We're in a different studio altogether now, so we'll bring it back to Double Whoopee. William Gillespie is the hotel manager.
Oh yeah, yes.
Who is also the piano salesman in the music box.
Music box, yeah, and he's in some of the Laurel solos. It's in Kill or Cure is one that comes to mind.
Okay. Is he in Wrong Again as well? Is he?
Yes.
The horse owner, I think, isn't he?
Yeah.
The Blue Boys owner.
Yeah, I think so.
That's right.
And he's quite interesting because I didn't know until relatively recent years that he was in some of the Chaplin Mutuals.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I hadn't recognised him from those because he looks so different.
Right.
But apparently it's him playing things like the drug addict in Easy Street and some other parts he had. I think he's maybe in 3 of them or something. But one of the things with the Chaplin Mutuals was that for too many years there was an element of doubt and guesswork as to the cast, with some mistakes. I mean, it was claimed that Tiny Sanford was in them. No, he wasn't.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Definitely not. I remember looking at The Immigrant in the early 70s and thinking, all right, Tiny Sanford's there. He must be one of the people in the crowd then. No, no, they thought he was the bearded gambler on board ship. It's not. I could see a mile off. That was Frank J. Coleman doubling up.
Right.
The fact he's about a foot shorter was a bit of a giveaway. A much tinier Sanford for me. No, for years, the credited cast list, those that they put together after the event, for me, were not terribly reliable. And I don't think they included William Gillespie, but looking at them again with having been told this, and yes, it is him.
Ah, right.
So,
okay.
So it's actually quite interesting how many of the players worked with more than just the obvious big one or two, as it were, the overlap. People are Charlie Hall again, Keaton College, he's in that.
Yes, yeah, of course.
So there's this tendency to work with the major comedians across the board, not just with one exclusively, because that has often been the assumption, I think, over the years.
Yes.
So,
because Tiny Sanford did work with Chaplin, of course, didn't he? And,
yes, he's in
Modern Times.
Yes, he's in Modern Times. He's in the Gold Rush, but you can barely see him in the sound reissue.
Ah, right.
He's much more visible, more often tending bar in the saloon. Right. In the original, you see more of him, and he's in the circus, and I think he's also the big guy in the pavement lift gag in City Lights. I think that's Sanford as well.
Oh, do you? Oh, I'll have to have a look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, one supporting player that we will have to mention, of course, is a very young Jean Harlow.
Yes. Who tends to steal the show rather.
It bugs me a little bit. I've got to say, I'll get it out of the way with now. Whenever we talk about Double Whoopee, you think of Double Whoopee, it's that Jean Harlow scene, and I just think it's totally
it's been flogged to death.
It has been flogged to death. I mean, I love what Everson says. She's no more than a comedy prop. And that's exactly it. I'd much rather spend time thinking and talking about Charlie Hall and Tiny Sanford's part in the film than there's few seconds of Jean Harlow turning up as a guest.
Yeah.
Yes, she is a star or will become a star. She's not a star there, that's just my thinking on it.
No, it's true. I think all this started when Robert Youngson put together the Golden Age of Comedy. And that was the bit from Double Whoopee that he used.
Right.
And that drew the attention both from audiences at the time, and they made a fair bit of it in the publicity too, to the point of having a publicity still retouched just to spotlight Ollie escorting Jean, and retouched in such a way as to make her look even more undressed than she does in the movie.
Right.
And some of the publicity artwork echoes that retouch still, I think, some of the line drawings. So they knew they had something that would draw attention, and they made the most of it. So I think that's probably where this starts. That's why it became such a famous bit, because nobody'd seen it for nearly 30 years when that came out.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And that was the bit people saw. Oh, yes, Laurel Hardy and Jean Harlow, whose legend had persisted.
Yes.
And people connected to that. And I mean, subsequently, Youngson did use a different section of Double Whoopee. This was in the Laughing 20s. But it's from later in the film, it's lift shaft gags. Yeah. And that did not capture the imagination in the same way. And it was, frankly, in a throwaway section. It was in a closing miscellany, really. It wasn't something that he decided to spotlight. So the famous bit from Double Whoopee had become and remained the Harlow thing. And I wonder even if it was the most inventive thing she did there, because it's very difficult to evaluate Harlow's time at Roach because too much is missing.
Right, okay.
Far too much. I mean, she did a couple where they were all stars, but the cast was led by Edgar Kennedy.
Yeah.
And the wonderfully titled "Why is a Plumber?" ? And the perhaps more directly Kennedy linked "Thundering Toupees." Yeah, I mean they're both gone. Charlie Chase had used Billy's a Bathing Beauty. What's it called? Chasing Husbands. We only know this because of one lobby card and one still, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she's among the bathing beauties on the beach, and Charlie Chase is another of them.
Now that's worthy of mention.
Yeah. Yeah, so until that one turns up, if it ever does, we won't be able to gauge any effectiveness. She was probably just, again, a pretty girl prop in that, I should have thought.
Yeah.
But I think she probably had more to do with the two missing ones with Ed Kennedy. And the one we do have something of is The Unkissed Man, which was actually there's a Harlow book. Remember that Citadel Films of ... series of books from the 60s? Well, ever since Laurel and Hardy was one of those.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah. And it was a very good series, but it was a long time ago, and it was before an awful lot of the scholarship had got going to that degree. So there's far less information available, far more guesswork having to be done, and so on. And they just do a brief section about Jean Harlow's early film work, breaking it down in detail. And they mentioned that she worked with Laurel and Hardy, and they said it was in 2 films, so like Double Whoopee and The Unkissed Man.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I remember reading this when I was really starting out as a film scholar in the proper sense, and looking at this and thinking, what is this unknown to me Laurel and Hardy called The Unkissed Man? I think this must be a mistake.
Yes.
And indeed it was. It was Roach, but it wasn't Laurel and Hardy. And it starred Brian Washburn, who was one of those stars on the way down that Roach engaged for shorts.
Okay.
And there's a bit of it in Further Perils. And this is Washburn apparently as a physician, Harlow as patient, and it's the gag about the blood pressure going up and going pop.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've seen that.
Yeah, over this attractive girl. And that apparently is what exists of it. That is it. I've seen reference to, obviously, despite any appearances to the contrary, I do some prep for these things.
I don't doubt it at all.
Plenty of would. But I looked it up in recent days, and it said something about a print preserved at Library of Congress or something. And I think, well, yeah, maybe, but I think all they've got is this segment. I think. And it does pose the question as to whether Youngson had access only to that surviving fragment, or whether there was complete material still on it at that point, which was allowed to go.
Yeah, possibly.
Because
didn't Everson had Youngson's films, I think, didn't he, at the end?
He had a lot of his 16mm.
Yeah.
I know that, because Youngson would get 16mm printed up of things that took his fancy particularly for his own collection. That's why Battle of the Century Reel 2 came back complete. That was Youngson's print. But he didn't keep everything, who could? And I wonder, because we've seen instances of things that Youngson had access to before they started decomposing. By the time most of the prints of second 100 years were being made, decomposition had got in.
Yeah.
And we'd lost some sections and some bits were damaged. Youngson had that printed up for his Golden Age of Comedy and on 16 for himself before the next started to go.
Right.
And so when his 16 turned up, that's what's being worked on now.
Yeah.
So it's got the missing bit with the cop getting the paint on him. It's got the earlier attempted escape scenes without the decomposition in, and the original main title, which had also got from the next. So yes, I don't know what Youngson had access to, whether it was a case of he took what he wanted from that and it went back in, was allowed to decompose, or whether even then that's all there was. Apparently that's, to go back to Further Perils, apparently when he used footage from Never the Danes Shall Meet, Charlie Chase with Viola Richard and Anita Garvin, I'd wondered if, again, there was a complete negative left still in 1967, and that Youngson usually wanted, and the rest went back and went. Apparently, no. This had come from a European archive, and that's all they had.
Oh, right. Okay.
Even then. But I had wondered for a long time. So maybe it was a case that there was a surviving pos fragment or something that Youngson had got from The Unkissed Man. I had no idea.
Yeah. Interesting, that. Yeah. I think, I mean, from what I've seen, read, I think Double Whoopee is probably the best of Harlow's performances at Roach. I don't think we're missing all that much. I mean, she herself says in New Movie Magazine in September 1934, she's talking about her life and career, and she said, "So overnight I jumped from the extra ranks into the feminine leading role with Laurel and Hardy." I mean, a feminine leading role. It's stretching it a little bit, let's be honest.
It is a bit, yeah.
The only feminine role with Laurel and Hardy and Double Whoopee.
Yeah. But it's interesting, though, that in the next one she did, she actually got billed on the titles, apparently. bacon grabbers turning up at the end as Edgar Kennedy's wife. Apparently, I don't think the original main title and that are known to exist. I haven't seen them turn up anywhere. I'm not aware of them, and I've never seen a cutting continuity of it, which would give a breakdown of what was on the titling.
Okay.
So if somebody can tell me,
that'll be interesting.
Yeah, please confirm this, that Jean Harlow was actually billed. Because it would have been with Ed Kennedy, Jean Harlow, I'd have thought.
Yes, yeah.
So obviously they thought enough of double Whoopee for her to get screen credit on the next one, which unfortunately turned out to be the last one.
Yeah.
Because her early husband, Mr. McGrew, and her grandfather were both pressuring her to get out. The grandfather, after having seen double Whoopee and being appalled by her in underwear, not very much. I think I dealt with my granddaughter doing this, and she was very unhappy.
Yeah.
But Roach, generously tore up the contract and released her because of that. And it was claimed somewhere, and I won't say where, not very long ago, that she left Roach because she was fed up with playing second fiddle to Laurel and Hardy, which I think is nonsense.
No. Well, I mean, in her own words, she does not mention that at all. She said exactly as you've just said. She doesn't mention her husband. She mentions her grandfather and grandmother.
Yeah.
Her grandfather and grandmother went to Kansas City and went to the cinema where Laurel and Hardy were playing. It was double Whoopee.
Yeah.
And yes, they weren't very happy with what they saw on the screen, and an angry grandfather telephoned her that night and begged her to stop motion picture work at once.
Yes,
and they said Roach allowed me to go. He released me from contract.
Yeah, but she apparently she loved it there. She thought a lot of Roach. She loved Laurel and Hardy. Loved working with them. Remembered how kind they'd been and helpful and so on.
That's right. And
when they met up again at Hollywood Dues in the 30s, they were obviously still very friendly.
Yeah,
and they obviously thought a lot of her. But of course, she does recur. What with the use of the photo in Beau Hunks and so a little in joke, I suppose. Yeah. But if they hadn't, I think if they hadn't got on well with her, they wouldn't have done that.
That's right. Yeah, that's of course. Yeah, of course. What I do find interesting is, as you say, they seem to get on well together, and they met up, and there are photographs of them, later meeting at parties, Stan and Jean Harlow specifically. But there's a letter I was reading on the letters from Stan website. Where Stan's replying to somebody about Jean Harlow, and he said, "Yeah, she was in a film with us back in the early days, but I never saw her again after that. Never heard her." So he's either got a very short memory, or he didn't recognise who he was at the time.
Yeah, you wonder. People do forget things, of course.
Well, they do. Yeah. We'll allow him that.
Yeah, but there was an interesting footnote to it all, though, because after letting Jean Harlow go, who did Roach hire to replace her but Thelma Todd?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Yeah, and you kind of wonder what direction each might have taken if Harlow hadn't been pressured to leave. Would she have never become the big star in features that she did? Would she have continued to develop as a Hal Roach player? And would she have been a regular, say, in the two reelers into the 30s, maybe some of the features, and never actually become the feature star? And where would Thelma Todd have gone?
Yeah.
What might have happened to her? And would either of them, the way life's coincidences can work out, everything has a cause and effect in life, would either of them have maybe lived a little longer? Would Harlow
That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Would Harlow not have become ill? If she, working in different circumstances, would Thelma Todd not have met the end she did? It's intriguing to think.
Interesting point, actually. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a very good point.
But speaking of interesting women who make an impact in double Whoopee, the other one, of course, is the wonderful scene with the woman and the compact with the ink.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah. And I'll put my hands up and admit freely that I did not know until quite recent times that it's Addie MacPhail, because I'd always wondered who it was. Because she's wonderful. Complete deadpan. She knew what she was doing, but how she kept a straight face.
Yes,
really, and quite an achievement. I wonder how many takes, but you couldn't do that once.
No, that's right. Yeah. No, it was very well done.
Yeah, but she does it with just the level of assumed haughtiness, which could not have been genuine if you're doing a scene like that. And,
no, that's right.
And she holds it, and she doesn't corpse. She's
Yeah.
She just holds a brilliant straight face. And she has a place in history for the wrong reasons, as having been the third and last wife of Roscoe Arbuckle.
Good grief.
She's Arbuckle's widow.
Yes, I knew the name. I just couldn't place it. That's right.
Yeah, and she did quite a lot of interesting things. She was in, comedy shorts in the 20s and the 30s, and got some feature work in the 30s. Funny enough, she's in Corsair with Thelma Todd under the name Alison Lloyd.
Ah, right, okay.
Yeah, Adam McPhail and Thelma Todd in the same picture. And one of the most frustrating things, talk about roles in sound shorts, since the year dot, I've had a 16mm print of a short sound comedy, I think it's educational, I'm not sure, with Billy Gilbert, and partly with Vince Barnett, because they did try to pair Gilbert with various comics over the years, as we know. And it's called Two Lame Ducks. And it was originally a 2-reeler, and the 16mm print is cut down to 1 reel. Right. And you look at it, main titles, there are 2 women billed in the cast. One of them, Addie McPhail.
Oh, wow.
And both have been completely removed from the 1-reel cut down. There's no sign of them.
Shame.
Yeah. And the same thing turned up on Talking Pictures TV, back to them again. They showed Two Lame Ducks. And again, it was a 1-reel cut down with those titles, they're credited on the titles, and no women. They're completely eliminated. It's probably the same version.
Yeah. Oh, it's a shame.
Yeah, I'm starting to think I will never actually see a 2-reel print of this. I mean, maybe one doesn't exist. I have no idea.
Possibly. Well, if anybody out there has got one, let us know.
Yes, please do.
That would be great. That'd be lovely.
So yes. Anyway, so that's the other woman who makes a big impact in Double Whoopee.
Yes, I'd forgotten about her. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah. And the last thing that I can think that I wanted to just ask you a little bit about is the talkie version of Double Whoopee.
I was about to say it.
Yeah, is it Chuck McCann, I think? Was it in the 60s?
That's the thing, because for years it's been said to have been done in 1969, and it's in the McCabe-Kilgore Band book of 69 and so on. But Randy Skretbit's most recent edition, the big one, gives a recording date for the soundtrack as in January 1970.
Oh, okay.
And it's a precise date, 17th of January, I think. And I've got a note here somewhere. No, 19th. My apologies. Yeah, recording date 19th of January 1970.
Right.
So perhaps 69 has long been a communal misremembering. I don't know, but but it's a lovely job. I mean, I'm not so rigid as to think this is sacrilege. I think it was, as long as you don't replace the original or seek to replace the original, and you can bring something new and interesting to it like this, and it works.
Yeah.
Especially if it works, I'm really not inclined to dig my heels in. And, Chuck McCann did a pretty fair job of the voices, and the other voice artist, it works well. And it goes back partly to the what we were saying earlier on about the studio having just got the sound equipment and converted technically.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, it looks like it's been shot like a talkie.
Yes, yeah, it does. Yeah, I was thinking that.
It really does, including the camera rate. I mean, we know the camera rate was going up and up and up anyway. By the late silent era, they were predicting 24, and quite often filming at 24, but often not, something slightly below it, just to give a slight acceleration, to give the action some zip, but not enough to make it look comical. And Laurel and Hardy were using, a high frame rate. Because they were playing it slowly. They were not hastening. They were not, as we were saying earlier on, they were not dashing about. They were taking it slowly. And so a realistic pace logically ties into a realistic camera rate. And an awful lot of Double Whoopee is very clearly shot at 24 frames, especially their arrival and all the business at the hotel, just the signing in, 24 frames. And they're not interrupting that much with the intertitles either. So, yeah, they can see that they're not gearing it in the silent mode, really. Even later on, when you've got Sanford saying, and don't let it happen again. There's no intertitling. We're clearly meant to lip read that.
Yes.
They felt that the intertitling was not necessary. And we're back to The Last Laugh again, actually, thinking about it. Not the lack of intertitling. but the way that the length at which the shots hold and so on, they were pacing. They were pacing the sound. Wrong. I think when we talked about Wrong Again, same thing again. We were saying that a lot of it looks like a talkie.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the way it's shot,
absolutely.
The pacing. They were shifting into talkie pacing. I think even then.
And also, just talking about the Sanford mouthing words, McCabe noted in his Babe biography that this is where Ollie mouths, here's another nice mess you've got me into.
I remember that, yeah. I've never spotted it.
I haven't either.
I've never been able to pick it up.
It's apparently just after the fight with Charlie Hall, or one of the altercations with Charlie Hall. So,
right, I've never
try again.
Yeah, I've never been able to recognise that. I can't help but feel there's an element of wishful thinking in it, but because it would have come in sooner when they started the talkies. I feel.
Yeah,
it would
that's
have.
True. Yeah,
yeah.
It was Murder Case, I think, wasn't it, when he actually did it?
Yeah, I think yes,
on screen. Yeah,
yeah. So I think it would have come in sooner if it had been an expression they wanted to use and give some currency. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I honestly don't know.
No.
But certainly they're talking about lip reading in this. I mean, the team behind this sound version had lip read it very carefully.
Yeah,
and it matches pretty well. I noticed that as he tended to do in the silence, Stan calls Ollie Babe. He's calling.
Yes.
Yeah, he can be lip read calling him Babe in that and a few others, Habeas Corpus, Big Business, probably others. And he's saying Babe. So for this sound version, it had to become Hey, because he doesn't call him Babe on the screen.
Of course, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is Hey, not Babe, but he's actually saying Babe. But you can lip read a great deal of it, and again, I think it was Randy Scrett that pointed out the difference between what's said in the silent version by the intertitles, what's actually lip readable, and what's dubbed into the sound version. Ollie and Jean Harlow, we've got him saying, "I guess I have to walk you in," and she said, "Oh yes, I guess you should," or something. And the intertitle that H.M. Walker came up with had this overblown, grandiose phrasing about, something to do with condescending to accept his escortage or something like that.
That's right. That's right.
This is where I long felt that Walker had perhaps not quite got them, because he picked up on the comedy stuff, sense of comedy and American comedy and so on. This quasi-British genteel manner of theirs. And he felt that it was likely to be reflected in rather overly delicate language that they wouldn't use. They were still like guys. They were the guys.
Yeah.
And like in but back to Habeas Corpus, the title card about, don't you think the professor is a trifle cuckoo?
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that it's an American's idea of how a posh Englishman speaks.
Yes, that's right.
It's not how they do speak, that's how they think they speak.
Yes.
Overly delicate. And
I speak like that all the time.
Oh, well, yes, but I'm not doing these, I do. Oh, yes, absolutely. Nobody understands a word. Not even me. But, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think Walker's take on them was, frankly, over prissy in the way they would speak.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's actually a good highlighting of that. It's not the way they were speaking on screen in front of the cameras,
right.
but it was what Walker put in. And we know that his dialogue scripts for them, when sound actually came in, weren't really quite right, and if not jettisoned, then extensively revised.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's one of the interesting aspects of the lip reading in Double Whoopee. And,
I'm not really sure what I make of it, to be honest. I watched it fairly recently again, just in preparation for this, and I just don't know. I'm not. I don't think it's not sacrilege. I mean, it's like colorization to me. I don't, unless it looks really authentically right, and it's then I can just about put up with it. I hate to see colorization when it's really gaudy colours. It's a real bugbear of mine.
Oh, yeah.
I would take the black and whites any day over colorization. And I know the argument is, well, it's not to replace it, it's just another alternative, which is fair enough, but you know, if something ain't broke.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, Roach was quoted about this when they first started doing it. He and this sort of time when he's really supposed to be out there helping to promote the new videos and so on. But this is no longer true because newspaper technology has altered. But in those days, a newspaper strip was black and white on weekdays, and the Sunday pages in colour. And he said, "Is a newspaper strip any funnier on the Sunday because it's in colour?"
Exactly right.
Yeah, and he's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah.
But anyway, but no, as regards the sound version of Double Whoopee, I think if it had been badly done, I would have hated it. But it is actually well done, and I feel very mean-spirited in criticising something that is as well done as it is.
Yeah, it is well done.
Yeah,
it is well done,
and it was done for the best of intent, the best of motives, and by people who love them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
This was a labour of love, and I would feel very mean-spirited if I were to criticise them for having done it, and I have no intention of doing it.
Okay, I'll do that then.
Yeah, it's not my default version. I wouldn't. Yes, I'll leave that to you. No, if I want to watch Double Whoopee, I'll watch the silent, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah,
but I'll look at the sound version every now and then just for the novelty of it, I suppose, and just to applaud the technical skill.
I think that's it. Yeah, I think as a what would I say, as a sort of an experiment, I think it's very good. It's been done very nicely. I'm not overly convinced with the voices. I think
no, not all of them.
I mean, some people think Chuck McCann's impersonations are very good, and as impersonations go, they're okay.
Yeah.
But I'm very not very critical. Is not the right word, but I don't like to see people impersonating Laurel and Hardy all that much because it's never very good. When you really. When you've sort of lived and breathed them day in, day out, when you're from a kid, you know exactly what the mannerisms should look like, and it's so hard to do it, to reproduce it.
And the inflections that you have to get wrong.
Exactly, yeah exactly. Even the Steve Coogan, John C. Reilly, there's so much in that just makes me cringe, and I wish they hadn't done it. Whereas a lot of other people I've seen it online. People saying, "Oh, they should take the script that Stan wrote and were never filmed, and they should make new." Why? What's the point in that?
Yeah, it's a dead end as far as I'm concerned, and there's no point in doing it. But
no, that's kind of what I feel with these the talky versions of silent films. What is the point, really? Are we as a society now so down the road that we can't watch a silent film because it doesn't have talking in it? Do we need to put talking back into it? I don't know.
No, but it's not necessary. So often over the years, I've met people who have never seen a silent film, and they have a strange idea of what it is, of what it would be like. Such as people who think it's just like a talking with the sound off. People are standing around mouthing wordlessly to each other. And at the other end of it, people assume it's all galloping Keystone Cop type stuff and what Chaplin called ass kicking. It's not that either. It's they've never seen it, so they don't know how it's done. It got a bit better when The Artist came out and people were inclined to see it, and then they looked at that's how they did it.
Yeah, that was very good actually.
Yeah, that was a superb job. And again, you can't do it twice, but they did it once and brilliantly. And I think it educated a lot of today's public to how silence worked.
Yeah,
they got more of an idea of what they were like. But I remember times when I mentioned showing a silent, and people go, "Oh no!" And sometimes they seem actively frightened by it. I'm not kidding. Really, there's something about the idea of not being able to hear the actors and having intertitling coming up on the screen that actually scares them. And I wish I were making this up, but I'm not. And I've never understood this. It induces a phobia in some people. It's quite extraordinary. So maybe that's part of it. But can you really blame people for not wanting to leave their comfort zone to go into something that they don't know and don't necessarily know what they like? I mean, the inquisitive people, yes, fine, but why should people necessarily want to venture into something which they see as an outmoded form.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if I think back to, when I was younger, I mean, I've, always drawn to the talkies, and again, going back to the music, put off a little bit of the silent films because the ones I'd seen, I wasn't very happy with the music. It put me off. But actually, the more you stretch that comfort zone, it then becomes the norm for you. That then becomes your comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, this is what I was coming to, because, as you know, I'm much involved with the silent film screenings at the Cinema Museum in London. The Kennington Bioscope is called. We've been just approaching our 10th anniversary, and we've been getting good houses for years now. Obviously, attendance varies, but an awful lot of people have come along who don't know silent films, but they've been attracted to this, or they've been intrigued, heard about it, and have come along to find out. And people who would have no expectations have got used to it. We get a lot of regulars, who had no real previous experience of watching silent films, who, they've learnt, they've seen, they've understood the form, they've got how they work, and they're used to it. Yes, it's become the norm, as you say, and it doesn't take that long. But for too many people, there is that immediate barrier for them that they can't get past, or are reluctant to get past. But those who do find that they would grow accustomed to the techniques very quickly, far more so than they would have expected, I think. But it's all about overcoming that initial psychological barrier. If I forget, the one thing I was going to chuck in, actually, vis-a-vis adding dialogue to Double Whoopee, what about these Laurel Hardy silents that have turned up on YouTube, including Double Whoopee, where they've attempted to create a dialogue track sourced from Laurel Hardy talkies?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that, actually. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. They make me laugh for the wrong reasons. I laugh because some of them are quite crude, aren't they, and quite choppy, and you can, and then I'm thinking, I know where that's come from. I know where that bit's come from. Mm-hmm. Again, as a little, an experiment, I think it's good fun. It's good fun, but I get tired of them after a few minutes, and I'll probably switch it off.
Yeah.
But,
I don't think I've sat through one complete. I'll be quite honest
with
you. No,
that's all right.
I mean, for me, it's an achievement in terms of the research or the memory as to where you might find the right bits of dialogue, or something approximating it.
Yeah.
The mere fact that they know they can go to this film, that film for that phrase is impressive.
It is impressive. Yeah. They know their stuff, don't they? They clearly know their stuff.
Oh, they do. And I have to tell you, this is not that new an idea.
Okay.
Let's go back a little bit in time. 51 years.
Wow. Okay.
51 years. There's me with Standard 8, Prince of Laurel Hardy, and a film striker, and a few Laurel Hardys. I was doing exactly this with a couple of them. And back to Arrow Films' One Reel Cut Downs, I had an Arrow Films One Reel version of The Finishing Touch. Not till afterwards, in less than a year, I found a Black Hawk print, second-hand, a 2-reel print, which I left alone. But I strike the one reeler. And I was sourcing the bits of Laurel Hardy dialogue from elsewhere to dub onto this thing.
Okay.
And actually, my dad helped out. He dubbed in a convenient adult male voice to double for Sam Lufkin. He was very good. So I've got my dad's long gone, but I've got his voice on this 8mm one reeler still.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Not the only one, but this is one of the few that I have. And I was finding myself picking up bits like "Be Big,"
When a Hardy makes his mind up, it's as firm as the Rock of Gibraltar.
Where Ollie, my title card, is saying, she's built like Gibraltar. I was doing the same thing, similar approximations. And when Unaccustomed as We Are became available over here on 8mm 2-reel, of course, it was the silent version because that's all there was at the time.
Yeah,
the sound version wasn't around, and I felt that I could try and do something to help it, to try and get it back to something like the dialogue movie should have been. And of course, Blockheads was useful for that.
Yes, of course it would be.
Yeah, a lot of Blockheads dialogue slots into it very well, and so I was doing the same thing, but with 8mm magnetic sound instead of on video and doing it on YouTube. So it's not that new an idea. So yes, I suppose I just have a little sympathy for it, but it's a stunt, really. It's no more than a stunt.
Yeah.
But quite an entertaining one.
It is entertaining. Yeah, it is entertaining. I'll give you that.
So,
as you say, certainly don't take anything away from people who've done it, because I think it is a real. It's done with a lot of love.
Yeah,
and that's. That's everything, really.
Yeah,
and if it attracts more people, new people to the film, then so be it. That's great. That's
yes, yeah, it may have that effect, which is all to the good. And but I have sympathy for them because I was doing it when I was 13.
Yeah, exactly. the only problem, of course, is if people who've never seen The Boys before see that as the first one, think, "What the hell is this?"
Yes, unfortunately, this
sounds weird. Yeah. I'm not going to watch any more of theirs.
Yeah, no, let's just hope that nobody comes to them for the first time by one of those. But no, really full marks to them just for the sheer knowledge and research in finding the audio clips.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I can sympathise with that. I mean, I intersperse little audio clips to these podcasts, so I'll go away and find little things that fit in with what we're talking about and insert them along the way. And it takes some doing. You suddenly recall something. I know what'll fit here. That's exactly it. But it takes some doing. It does.
Oh yes, people don't understand. The shared dedication.
Exactly right. Yeah,
the doggedness of it all.
Well, I think we've probably exhausted Double Whoopee. For my notes are dry again,
and ourselves,
and ourselves. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. Tell you what. Yes. There's one thing I was going to throw into the hat, which I meant to. I talked about the absence of the Bacon Grabbers main titles, the originals. Same's true of Double Whoopee. We don't have the original main titles.
Oh, okay.
And that card we see quite often, how represents Laurel Hardy, Double Whoopee with Jean Harlow. I think that was the one that's created for that sound version.
Right.
It's not the style of the originals. It's not the way they were presented. And I think that, as with That's My Wife, this was one of those silents that film classics got a hold of in the 40s for potential reissue and remade the opening titles, not realising it was a silent and then having to shelve it.
Right.
Because long, long, long ago, I saw a print of Double Whoopee with film classics titles, which we don't usually see. It doesn't usually turn up, but I have seen a print with them on there. So I think the original Roach MGM titles were removed from the negative in the 40s and just got discarded. I don't think we'll ever see them again.
Interesting.
Yeah, but the card we see, which purports to be original looking, certainly isn't.
Yeah.
And say out there are some film classics copies, but the originals are long, long gone, I think.
Well, I guess next year we may find out when Serge Bromberg puts his Year 2 Laurel and Hardy Blu-ray out.
Yeah,
we'll see what happens. Because it's been surprising that the things that he's told us that are in the Year 1 set, the things they found, is just remarkable. So it's really exciting to see what's going to turn up.
Yes, I mean, pleasant surprises await, I think, and what Serge turns up for these things, wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
Yeah. If anybody's going to find it, it'll be Serge and his team now.
Oh yes,
he's onto a good thing there, so that's great.
Indeed.
Great.
Right.
Okay. Well, Glenn, I'm going to thank you very much indeed for joining us again on today's show.
I've enjoyed it, and thank you for having me on.
It's always a pleasure, and we will certainly have you back on very soon, I'm sure. So, thank you very much, Glenn, and we'll see you soon.
Indeed. Bye for now.
And so that concludes episode 32 and our deep dive into Double Whoopee, a film that is much more than just a 3-minute sequence. Do get in touch and share your thoughts on both the film and on this episode. I'd love to hear from you. Next time, we focus on a film that often gets overlooked, but I think is an absolute cracker, Bacon Grabbers. And don't forget, if you want to listen to any back episodes of the podcast, or subscribe to the Laurel and Hardy magazine, or even purchase copies of any of our previous issues to complete your collection, then just visit www.laurelandhardyfilms.com. If you'd like to hear an extra 20 to 30 minutes of Laurel and Hardy chat with me and Glenn Mitchell, then this month's exclusive segment for patrons is now live on Patreon. Anybody can access this and all my other Patreon exclusive podcasts by signing up at patreon.com. That's patreon.com. Links to everything are in the podcast show notes as usual and on the laurelandhardyfilms.com website. And all that remains is to say thank you to today's special guest, the brilliant Glenn Mitchell. Thank you to the Beau Hunks Orchestra and Basta Music. And 1,000 thanks to you for sharing this time with me again. And so until next time, it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
And a very goodbye from me. Goodbye.